So let's get started, everybody. Welcome. I'm excited to have you here. My name is Paula Price, and I'm a lawyer and certified executive coach. And I'm presenting today's webinar on getting ready for your first law firm job in summer of 2020. And this, I will tell you, is a very unusual summer. You don't need me to tell you that, but I've designed a program that will take us, excuse me, that will really take us through what a normal summer involves. And I will let you know that that idea was inspired by one of you, a student who reached out to me when in relation to some of the courses that I've been publishing. And she asked me about my experience as a law student. And I realized that for you, students who are joining law firms this summer, the typical law firm experience is quite unlikely to happen. From what I understand, a lot of firms are either canceling or curtailing or doing their summer programs in quite a different way. So, in a sense, what I am doing is taking you through what a summer typically looks like. And in a way, it's like it's like a flight simulation. If you were to go to the moon without actually going to the moon, what would that experience look like? What are the things that you need to prepare for? What are the things that you would normally keep in mind? So that's really how I've thought about this presentation as I have prepared for it. Now, this presentation is primarily for law students, but I am also delighted to have junior lawyers, other lawyers attend, law school career advisors, and law firm talent management professionals. So everyone is welcome today, and I would love to receive comments or feedback that you have. In terms of what you can expect, this is going to be an hour-long presentation. I plan to speak for about 45 minutes on the prepared topics, and there will be about 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. Now, in terms of participation, and I would invite you to participate, there's a chat for comments and there's Q&A for questions. And I will tell you right now that I turned off my chat because it's very distracting. And the Q&A, I can't see it until I open up I will have to stop sharing my screen, and then I will open up the Q&A for questions. And you will be able to see questions if you open that window on your screen. And if you can type in a question, you can submit it anonymously if you like. And if you see a question that you like, you can promote it by clicking on the thumbs up icon. And that means that when I see questions at the end, I'll be able to see which ones are the most popular questions. The chat, you're also welcome to do that. As I mentioned, I won't really be keeping a close eye on it right now. But I'll try to do that when we get to the Q&A portion. Before we jump into the material, I'd also like to acknowledge, I'm broadcasting out of Vancouver, Canada, and I'd like to acknowledge the land on which I'm gathered, at least, as the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, and that includes the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I extend that acknowledgement across the province and other provinces within Canada. I would also like to acknowledge you. I think every one of you who has signed up, all the students who have provided me with feedback, all of this is really incredible, and it helps me to serve you better. It helps me to know what you are finding helpful and how to tailor my work for you. I would, so we'll move on into the next phase, which is the learning goals. And this is what we are going to cover today. So we're going to talk about the hallmarks of a typical summer program. We're going to talk about challenges that students often face, and we're also going to talk about opportunities in relation to each of these. And as we jump into what those hallmarks are, I'd just like to say that law firms are like snowflakes. And by that, each law firm is unique, and each law firm will offer a summer program that is different from the other summer programs. And so I can't speak for all firms. I can also tell you that I am a bit of a snowflake because I also have a unique perspective. So I was a summer student in 2002. So, yes, that goes back quite a ways, and I'll spare you the mental math. I'll be 43 in about a month. I also worked at a national firm in Vancouver for over a decade, where I was involved in the student process. So I was helping with recruitment, I was helping with onboarding. Um, I also have training now as an executive coach, and in the work that I've done as a coach, I've been working with lawyers who lawyers and students, and I see the challenges that they're facing in their practices. I also have been doing a lot of work online. And so that is a perspective that I bring to the table. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that that's how I have shaped the content for today's program. That being said, when I stepped back and thought about what are the common features of summer programs, what are the objectives for students, I boil it down to these 5 points. And the first thing is how things work. And don't worry, I'll go into each of these in detail. But just to give you an overview, how things work, legal training, feedback, social integration, and professionalism. So these to me are the main elements of a summer program. So first of all, is how things work. And how things work is probably a good entry level point. What I'm talking about here is you step into the law firm and you are given a security pass. You are explained how the technology works. You are invited to create, you're entering passwords, you're setting up document systems, you're seeing how the precedents work. You are also being introduced to all the individuals in the firm who support this work. So that would include the tech support, that includes the assistants who are going to be helping you out, that includes the librarian if you're at a larger firm and they have somebody who is responsible for that. It can also be the marketing department. And so this is, in a way, an initial step where you're getting to know the individuals that are in your firm. Why this step matters? Well, it matters because this is a safe start. Really, it's an introduction. It's an introduction where you are able to familiarize yourself with your surroundings. You get to know everybody, and it's in a fairly safe space. You're not being tested, for example, on how well you can access a document, but it's a way of sort of integrating you into the system of the firm. And in my view, it can create a sense of security. It's, understanding what your parameters are, understanding your environment. It's also giving you the tools that you need to do your job. It's also an opportunity to meet the team, and that is fundamental to the experience that you'll have in a law firm, which is understanding law firms are like ecosystems. There are all sorts of different personalities and roles and functions, and it's your introduction to getting to know some of those individuals. Now, in terms of challenges, I sort of had to think about this. What are the challenges that students face in respect of this first step? And there are a few. One of them is working with support. And one thing that I found a little odd when I started working at a law firm was that I was assigned an assistant, and my assistant was at least twice my age and had been at the firm a lot longer than I had, and yet I was instructing her. And so thinking about how you will approach a relationship with somebody who is there to help support you can be a new thing. I've typically had pretty good relationships, and I've had good luck with most of the individuals that I've worked with, but it isn't always easy. And learning how to delegate, learning how to be respectful, learning how to give feedback when maybe you've asked for something to be done and it didn't come back quite the way that you had asked for it. These are all skills that you will need to develop, or that you would typically be starting to develop over the course of a summer. And that I can tell you is a lifelong learning experience, and lawyers that are quite senior can continue to have challenges working with staff and their support staff. And so I would encourage you to think about how you want to approach those relationships because they're really important, and your those who support you can really help you out. Um, in terms of other challenges that students might face, um, in a way, this is more of how you approach this type of work. And it's the idea that there is no job too small. And when it comes to sort of the basics, and in a normal summer, this might be how to send a fax and how to, well, okay, that was a really bad example because people don't really send faxes anymore, but how to use your email, how to scan to PDF, how to um, do all these sort of nitty gritty document things. The more of those skills that you can learn to do yourself, the better. There is no job too small. And yes, you may be able to rely on assistants to help you with this type of work most of the time. But if you're on a tight deadline and you're at the office and it's late and there's nobody there to help you, it really helps if you can be the person who knows how to do those things. Um, Another area where I've seen challenges is where, and this is very one-off, but the idea of blaming technology or blaming somebody else for something that didn't go wrong. And I've seen this happen in situations where something really was a problem. There was a glitch with the computer. I've also seen it, unfortunately, in situations, not a student, but somebody who blamed their assistant when the court documents weren't packed correctly. Ultimately, as a professional, the buck stops with you, and it's your responsibility. And so, um, taking ownership of that and dealing with that in a mature way is important. And so that is a place where I have seen some challenges. That approach of not taking responsibility generally doesn't go over well. So really think about how you can, if that does happen to you, approach that in a very proactive way. Here's what the problem was. Here's how I'm solving it. That will get you a lot further. So there are also opportunities. Again, this is kind of going back to some of the basics, but um, as you are getting introduced to the firm, you'll have an opportunity to meet people who can really help support you in your practice. And so I like to think of it as a bit like working in a restaurant. And for a time, I was a server. And part of my job was, obviously serving tables, and I would make money by people tipping. And so I learned very quickly that it wasn't just me doing my job. I needed to work with other members of the team to make that happen. And so, the host or the greeter would seat the table. So you want to make sure that you have a good relationship with that person. The bartender, the kitchen staff, they're providing the food on the table, the drinks on the table. So when you have a customer who refuses a dish because there's peanuts on it and they have a peanut allergy, and you need to go back and have that dish remade in a hurry, have you established a relationship with that person or those people so that they will want to support you in your work? And that happens in law firms. It's late at night and your document crashes. You want to have a relationship with the person in the IT department who can really help you fix that problem. So that's an opportunity, is to really form relationships with various members of the firm. The second opportunity is that you can become the master of all things. I don't want to say mundane, but these sort of basic things. I mean, you can become the most organized person on a file, and by doing that, you can become a go-to for other lawyers on the file. They will be delighted to have somebody who is organized, who can help them. And as they develop that relationship with you, they will see you as that person. There's also an opportunity for more social learning. So as you work with other lawyers and you see there are some lawyers who are very organized, and you might ask them about their systems. And I think a lot of lawyers would be quite pleased to share that information with you and pleased to have the opportunity to connect with you. And that is a way for you to learn more and also forge a relationship with those other lawyers. What is different now? Well, it really is different. Going into this summer, I understand law firms have all sorts of different approaches. And so this idea of going into a law firm and being handed your security key and sitting in a boardroom with, some other students learning all these systems, it's very unlikely. And so the emphasis here, I think, is really on looking at what the structures are, how you can master those structures quickly, and how you can reach out to form the relationships that you need and learn the technologies that you need to do your job. You are also potentially going to be quite helpful to other lawyers. I mean, for lawyers who have just started working from home, this will you can potentially help them out a lot. And as our next generation, I would expect many of you are very tech savvy and you can bring things to the table that you didn't even realize. So the next piece is legal training. And um, by this, I'm talking about substantive legal training. And in a typical summer, this will look like on the job training. So that's the billable work that you do on a file. It is also on the, and that looks different depending on what you're doing. So if you are in litigation, for example, you may be drafting court documents, you may be reviewing documents, you may be doing legal research and writing memos, you may be going to court to have hearings adjourned. There's all sorts of things that you may be doing. Um, I'm less well versed in the corporate setting. I didn't really do much of that. So, but I expect there's still some of the same. Maybe you're reviewing documents for due diligence. Maybe you're helping to draft agreements. There's all sorts of things that would be considered billable file work. There's other opportunities for on-the-job learning, and those are non-billable. So, for example, you may be writing articles, you may be helping to write and deliver presentations, you might be updating precedents that the firm relies on. So, these are other ways that you can be learning. Other opportunities are in-house courses. So, law firms typically will have some form of in-house training. It may be that there are practice groups and they're having their practice group meetings. They may also be hosting, maybe it's a one-off. There's a new development in the law and they'd like somebody to present on that. So there are opportunities in-house for you to learn. And there's sort of twofold opportunities. One is you could be the presenter. That's one opportunity for learning. The other opportunity is, of course, attending. And as you progress, there's also outside learning. And I think this happens less typically for students, but as organizations hold conferences and that sort of thing, those are also other ways where you can learn about developments in the law and that sort of thing. So the opportunities for learning are quite different in a law firm depending on the state of the market. And so in a strong market, it looks like this. There is work flowing. It's abundant. In that case, you will have a lot of opportunities to learn on the job. Chances are you will not need to market yourself because you will be having work come to you. And as you're working on these projects, there's a real sense of belonging. So in a weak market, it's quite a different environment. There's less work for everybody. And what that means is that there is less on the job training in that section that we talked about, the file work. It means that you will need to ask for work. It also means that you'll need to create opportunities. So these are very, very different experiences. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more. The reason that work matters, it kind of goes without saying, but there are a few ways of looking at this. I mean, there's the idea that you are serving others as you're doing the legal work, and that is what you're in the law firm to do, is to put into practice the skills that you've been learning at school, at law school. It's giving you an opportunity to contribute. So you're helping your clients, you're helping the firm, you're helping others. You are learning as you go. And the work that you do is helping to integrate you into the law firm. The key difference between work and school is when you're in school, assignments are really given to you, and your job is to complete those assignments and to do them according to the specifications of your instructor. When you are in a law firm, it's just not quite as straightforward, and there's a lot more of an emphasis on you soliciting that work. And so there's a real mindset shift that is one from, this is oversimplifying because I think students can be proactive, but it's this idea of a reactive, you do what you're expected to do, versus a proactive where you are now seeking out opportunities and you're finding new ways to do them. I mean, when you have an assignment in school, everybody is submitting something that looks kind of similar, whereas in a law firm, each project is unique. You're not all working on the same piece of a file. You're working on different aspects of it. Um, so going back to this sort of broader picture, we're looking at the legal training. What are some of the common challenges for students? And again, these are different depending on the strength of the market. So in a strong market, some of the biggest challenges that I've seen among students really center on communication. And one thing that has happened, and if it happens to you, you're not alone, but it is missing the point on an assignment. And this usually stems from a lack of communication during the instruction taking stage. And it can be because you didn't understand what the instructions were. Maybe you were shy to ask for clarification. You didn't want to seem like you didn't know what you were talking about. But this has happened, I've seen this happen a number of times where, and this happens to more than just students, it happens to lawyers, where you go quite far down a path and you submit something to a more senior lawyer and they come back with, this is interesting, but it's not answering the question. And so that I think is one of the biggest challenges that students face when it comes to the work aspect of it. And it would happen more, I think, in a strong market because there's just more volume of work, but it equally happen in a weak market. The other piece is when you're in a very busy environment, then you get into this question of managing deadlines and managing time. So making sure that you have clear expectations for those who you are working with. That could be a challenge when you have so much work on your plate, you don't know how to manage it. And that can lead to a couple other things, which is rushed work. If you aren't able to spend the time necessary to do the job correctly, it may show in the work product. And the other piece is enthusiasm. And so, as you have all these assignments coming your way, sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming. It's really important, though, if you look at it from the perspective of the lawyers who are assigning the work, they will really want to work with students who they feel want to work with them. And so conveying that enthusiasm, that work ethic, that interest in being part of the project, that I think is an area where sometimes I think there's a bit of a miscommunication, and it can be a challenge for some students. In a weak market, the challenges are very different. First of all, there's less of an opportunity potentially for the learning because not as much file work is coming in. That means that you may not be, you may not have that work, and you can start losing confidence. You might feel like nobody's giving me work, they don't think that I'm capable, and that can kind of lead to this sort of self-fulfilling cycle where you then are less proactive about seeking work. And what can happen is that you then don't integrate because you're not really in the position to have these interactions based on work. So that can be a real challenge for students in an environment where the work is just not flowing. Now we're going to turn to opportunities. In a strong market, first, lots of learning, right? I mean, you're in this crazy environment where just things are happening. There's a lot of opportunity to climb faster, to reach higher, to move up in terms of the assignments that you're doing and take on higher level work. It's a wonderful opportunity to develop your professional skills. So if you've got a lot of different timelines that you're juggling, you might need to, you'll learn how to prioritize. You'll maybe learn how to negotiate. You might have to sort of move a few deadlines around. You will learn how to work in a team. Maybe you will be delegating some of that work. And it will give you an opportunity to show yourself as a team player. In a weak market, there are also opportunities to learn. There is going to be more onus on you to create those opportunities, which is not such a bad thing. This is a chance for you to show that you are able to go and generate work yourself. And so some ideas for that would be looking at a law firm's precedent system, looking at articles that you might write, papers, presentations that other lawyers are doing that you might help with. There may be stale files that have been around forever that lawyers are not really in the mood to deal with. You can offer to deal with those files, um, and other things that just typically are not getting done. Um, in this current climate, there are some lawyers who are really struggling. And I think human nature is such that when somebody helps you at a point where you really need it, that person will really, really appreciate you and they will remember you going forward. Um, you can be that person to a lawyer who is struggling. Um, so you might just offer to help them out. And I think now is the time where lawyers are reaching out to their clients, trying to help them because a lot of their clients are having a difficult time. And thinking about how you can be a part of that is will help you find work that you can then do. Um, in the digital age, so stepping back, I've described a typical summer, and you may be thinking, well, I'm not in the law firm itself. And when I was a student, and I don't know that it has changed very much, the idea was that you would sort of walk around through the halls with a pen and paper in hand and seek out work. Well, it's a lot harder to do that if there's no halls for you to walk through. But in the digital age where we're now communicating using Zoom, using other strategies, there are opportunities. And you will need to think about, well, what is the equivalent of going door to door and seeking out work? And so I invite you to do that. You can be proactive, thinking about the lawyers that you would like to be working with, how you might be able to help them. And you might be finding new ways of helping out. So maybe you're helping to host meetings that are done digitally. Maybe you are suggesting, maybe there are new areas of law that are emerging and you can help lawyers update themselves or provide updates to clients. Maybe it's something like, that lawyers are struggling to figure out a certain piece of tech that's been introduced, and you have a really great way that you might approach that. So, this is really thinking outside the box and how you can integrate in an environment where we don't have that physical space, but we do have that digital space. And I think I have this in my notes. I touch on this later, but one really interesting development that I've noticed since we've been sheltering in place is that the opportunities to reach out and connect have really widened. We are now on a level playing field where physical distance doesn't matter so much. And so you can reach out to lawyers and individuals in a way that maybe wasn't as easy to do before. And for some lawyers who may be less busy, that might be an opportunity for you to connect with them. And maybe they wouldn't have had as much time before. So these are all things to think about in relation to the work aspect. So we're going to move on to feedback. And feedback has a number of faces in a law firm. I'm just going to pause. I've identified three of them. The first is formal feedback. And for most law firms, this idea of a midsummer review has been, I think, a pretty standard thing. I know that some law firms have talked about moving away from that model, but when I summered and while I was at a firm, this was still being done. And so that process looks like this. The student does the work for a number of lawyers. Somebody, usually the person responsible for the students, goes and interviews the lawyers for whom that student worked, collates all the feedback, and that feedback is delivered to the student at some point in the summer. That is at a rough level what that formal review process looks like. In addition to that, there's informal feedback, and this is the feedback that you get on the go in relation to specific assignments. So that would look like you submit a memo, and the lawyer that you submit it to comes back to you, and I love red pen. I don't know if people still do that or if it's all track changes, but they come back and they've got feedback, specific feedback on a piece of work that you have done. That is live feedback. You may also receive feedback in relation to maybe you present something and somebody says something about the way that you presented. That's the second category. The third category is what I refer to as the unspoken feedback. And that is a little bit more subtle. And so that might be you do work with a particular lawyer, and that lawyer keeps showering you with work. They won't leave you alone. That's a sign that they probably really like your work. You may also have the opposite experience where you do work with a lawyer and that lawyer never really follows up with you, you never see them again. Now, I don't want you to read into that. That's coming up. Don't read too much into that, but it is potentially a sign that that maybe something didn't go right in that assignment, or maybe that is a subtle way of them sort of distancing. So I don't want to set off alarm bells with that. The point here is to take a step back and think about the different categories of feedback that you are receiving while you are at a summer. And again, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of a typical summer. We're going to have to look at that in the context of what you would be experiencing now. Why does feedback matter? Again, this is one of those things that almost goes without saying. It's a tool for learning. Feedback is so important for your growth as a lawyer, as a professional, and learning how to seek out feedback, learning how to listen to feedback, learning how to act on feedback. This is probably the most important data that you're going to receive in terms of being able to fuel your growth going forward. So it is very important. Um, Feedback will give you cues for where you need to grow. It will also give you cues for what you're doing well. When you receive positive feedback, you can really, really lean into your strengths. Feedback gives you an opportunity to show that you can learn. So when you receive feedback and you take that feedback and you act on it, people will notice that, and it shows them that you're interested, you're able, you're capable, you can do it. It also helps to expand your market. And what I mean by this is the feedback that you receive. I mean, there's feedback that goes to you, and I guess that really is what I'm talking about. But there's also the feedback that you'll have that is more of a word of mouth type of thing. So if you've got a lawyer who is in the hallway singing your praises, then another lawyer thinking about something that they have on their desk might think of you. You might be the first person on their radar when it comes to giving their next assignment. So that kind of soliciting feedback, it's all really it's really helpful for your growth. Now there are a number of challenges with feedback, and I would say, well, in no particular order. Number one is taking feedback personally. I have been on, I've been on both sides of receiving feedback, positive and negative. Um, One thing that I have found quite difficult as a lawyer giving feedback to a more junior lawyer was feeling like the feedback that I was giving was not being received. It was not welcome. And um, it really creates for a bit of an awkward um, dialogue, because I have such a strong view of what feedback can mean. And so, for example, when I receive feedback, I actually really appreciate when somebody takes a piece of written work and destroys it with red pen. I get to see, okay, this is how somebody else has perceived my work. This is how they would make this work better. And I get to receive that data. I get to think about that data and make decisions about how I'm going to do work going forward. Now, if that feedback comes from a specific lawyer and you are doing work with that lawyer, that's a really great, that lawyer is now giving you all the clues that you need to work with that person. And so that's really, really valuable information. You may not agree with the feedback, and then you get to decide, am I going to do it because I know this other lawyer likes it or not? So my first point is, as you are receiving feedback, try not to take it personally. Try to really focus in on what you can learn from that feedback and how you're going to act on it going forward. And there's a whole lot behind feedback that we could talk about. I'm not going to go into that right now, but it is a very interesting area. Not showing that you've learned from the feedback. So again, if somebody comes to you and they've got all this feedback and you kind of ignore it, that person will probably feel a little bit like let down, that you didn't follow up on it. um, which is quite different from when you can come back and say, look, I've acted on the feedback. Here's what I've done differently. Um, Not getting any feedback is a big challenge. And I found working in a law firm, sometimes you'll never get feedback, or the feedback is really slim. Like, this looks okay can actually be a really high compliment, or I'm going to pass this on to the client. It's not specifically telling you feedback about your work, but it's a stamp of approval that the work that you've done is client ready. So it can be hard to get feedback when you're working at a law firm. Other challenges is not asking for feedback, not knowing how to ask for feedback, or figuring out how to stay composed if you do receive negative feedback. So these are all challenges that you might face. In terms of opportunities, okay, they are endless. When you're working in a law firm, you're working with lawyers and you're receiving feedback, you are receiving feedback from lawyers who have more experience than you typically, who are potentially experts in their field, and that information is really, really valuable. Um, so that is one opportunity that you have in a firm. Another opportunity is that you're there already and you can learn how to ask for feedback about your work, and also learn how to provide feedback, because that's also a really useful skill in terms of others that you might be working with and that sort of thing. Um, in the digital age, again, recognizing that you may not be physically in a law firm, what might you do to create opportunities to seek and give feedback? A couple things that I really like. One is screen sharing. So being able to be on a Zoom call or a similar type of call where you're both able to look at, or more than one person is able to look at the same document. That can be a really neat exercise in terms of just discussing what the document says and areas that you can kind of tweak that. Another is to watch recordings of yourself. And I don't know that you'd be recording meetings, but if you are able to, and I've done this to see, okay, well, here's how I presented here. That can also be useful feedback that doesn't actually involve anybody else. Now we're going to move on to social integration. And I'm looking at the time. I'm going to try to sort of do the next couple points quickly. But law firms, as you would expect, are opportunities for connection, right? Everybody goes, there is the physical, um, there's the physical space together, where you sit can be really important. You have the opportunity to work with other lawyers in your firm. There are informal interactions. You may be assigned a principal, a mentor. You have lunch and learns, social functions. When I was a summer student and the summer programs that I saw, there's a lot of going to the bowling alley or the restaurant or the activity. There's a lot of activities that are built into the summer that really aren't viable in this particular space right now. My guess is there will be other ways of connecting, but it'll be just a different format. Why does the social integration aspect matter? Um, Job satisfaction would be high on my list. Finding support from others, sharing ideas, opportunities to cooperate with other students, teamwork, and from the perspective of your career over the long term, the students that you work with, the lawyers that you work with, become part of your network. And if you choose to have them as part of your network going forward, that can be really great. You can start building that network now. The other aspect of it is that the lawyers that you work with, they're the ones who make decisions. And so as you form relationships with the lawyers and other professionals in your firm, that will really help determine your career path going forward within the firm. And in the event that you do not stay with the firm that you are currently with, or your first firm when you get there, is that establishing those relationships will also give you uh, people who can endorse you as you apply for other opportunities. Some challenges is that lawyers can be intimidating. You may miss opportunities to connect with other lawyers if you are shy. I found law firms can sometimes be environments where the extroverts prevail. So that's something that you may find challenging as a student. I know I did. I found it very intimidating to speak with some of these more, especially some of the more senior lawyers. You may try to fly under the radar, but again, then you're not making those same connections. Peer relationships can be a challenge. I had a student reach out last summer who had mentioned that there was some awkwardness in the relationship among a group of students at a law firm. And it's not surprising because in that group, you are all together. There is an element of competition. Often, not all students will be invited at the end to join the firm. But there's also an element of collaboration. And so that can be a tricky relationship or tricky relationships to negotiate. You may find that there is a mismatch between you and people who have been assigned to you. It may be your mentor, it may be your principal. And finally, there are difficult personalities, and you may find that you don't get off on the right foot with somebody, and that can be a bit awkward. So there are opportunities. We talked about some of these before. You're in the firm. Now's an ideal time to network. Think about who you want to have in your circle and find ways to reach out to them. And when it comes to this piece, this networking piece, number one, I would set my expectations at zero. Don't expect, or you should assume nobody will come to you, and put the onus on yourself to go to them. I think just that mindset shift will help you be more proactive and not take it personally if people aren't, flooding your inbox with invitations. And the second piece is you might think about expanding your network beyond your firm. So yes, it's wonderful, and I highly encourage everybody to network within their law firms, especially as you're there over the summer. But if there are lawyers or professionals outside of your firm who you want to connect with, now is a great time. Really, the world is shrinking. Virtual connection is higher than it's ever been, and it's a great time to do that. So looking at the time, I promised Q&A in about 3 minutes, and I realized that sorry, I'm just looking at this. So I realized that we're getting close to that time. So the last piece, the last pillar is professionalism. And I'm going to spend a few minutes on that. Then I'm going to spend a few minutes telling you about the course that I'm offering, and then we'll have a bit of time for Q&A. So thank you, and please bear with me. So professionalism is, it's the glue that holds all of these pieces together. It is how you communicate. That's your written communication, that's your spoken communication. It's how you manage expectations, not just the expectations of others, but also your own expectations. It's your work ethic. It's how you manage your time. It's the pride that you take in your work. It is maintaining confidentiality and discretion, and it is establishing your trustworthiness with your colleagues. Why it matters, like I said, it's the glue that holds it all together. And it's an area where a lot of students struggle, especially because students often come to law firms without having any experience working in a law firm. Common challenges that I've seen among students, communication is huge. So writing clearly, law students come out with their academic training, and there's a transition to be made between the way that you would write a paper for a professor and an email that would go to a client. And so it's really thinking about communication in a new way. Speaking clearly, concisely, and making your point. Inspiring confidence is a huge one. Your clients initially are other lawyers. They will eventually be clients in the traditional sense. And your ability to convey confidence to them is critical to them feeling comfortable and confident working with you. Other areas we've talked about, clarifying instructions and asking questions. These are all in the nature of communication. And that is probably the area where there is the biggest potential for growth. Time management, so getting used to operating on these tight timelines and having work come at you from multiple different angles, needing to learn how to negotiate deadlines, planning your time, recording your time is a big one. If you're at a firm where you need to bill your hours. Customer service, so thinking about your work in the nature of service. Who are your clients? How are you serving them, and are they coming back for more? Confidentiality and discretion. Do you understand the rules, and are you respectful of them? these are all pieces of professionalism that together will help you be the student, be the lawyer that people want to come to with their problems so that you can help them. There's a lot of opportunities in a firm, virtual or not. Number one, there are a number of role models that you get to observe. So as you see different lawyers and you see their different working styles, you'll see elements of professionalism that you can pick and choose from to incorporate into your own practice. Um, Another opportunity is, and this really comes from having that confidence that you've got those professional skills, is that you're able to speak the same language and you're able to have the confidence that you need to pursue projects, to pursue relationships that will help you advance in your career. So now I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about the program that I'm offering for the summer. I've called it Not Your Average Student Program, and it is a passion project, frankly. I started doing this work with students last summer, in a way, this work meaning communicating in the digital space. And I produced a free online course that was designed for a typical summer. And I had a number of students respond to that. And I decided to sort of carry through the summer with them by doing weekly emails, different theme each week. And I always dreamed of making that project into something more. I had student feedback saying, I wish that I had more of a community throughout my articling experience. They wanted to go more in depth on certain topics, and I really wanted to be able to deliver that. I also see my role as being a unique role in being able to provide a space for students that is neither a law school nor a legal employer. And the reason I think that is important is because we're all learning here. Students are all learning, and to have a space where they don't have to worry so much about how they're being evaluated is, I think, a really important place to have. I also think there is a need and an opportunity for students to connect with each other in a way that is based on mutual learning, mutual growth, and giving each other an opportunity to test out some of these things. So the program that I'm offering is a 6-week program, and it's designed to be done virtually. And the way it works is every week there is a class. It's an online live class. I'll probably do it in either a webinar or a meeting format, depending on how many students sign up and the level of interaction that students are interested in having with each other. But the idea there is to do 6 weeks, and there's a lesson, and then there will be tasks or challenges. I intend to have the students work together, but I don't want to be assigning group work. I know that can be stressful for a lot of people when you're trying to rally the troops and aim for a certain letter grade. That's not what this is all about. This is about building on our relationships with each other to focus on developing the skills and the tools that we can then use going forward to thrive in a professional setting. So to give you an overview, week 1 is about goal setting, taking on a mandate, and project planning. So this is really figuring out what you want to achieve over the summer. If you're taking on a project, how do you budget time for that? How do you plan for your projects? The second week is about professionalism, organization, and timekeeping. And so as lawyers, a big piece of the job can be this notion of maintaining the billable hour. So I want to talk to you about that and how to develop those practices, how to stay organized, communication, those pieces. Week 3 is all about writing. And writing, as I sort of mentioned before, there's different styles of writing depending on what it is that you're doing. So I'd like to spend a lesson and a week on that, really thinking about, point first writing, client-centered writing, getting really crisp in terms of how you do that. Week 4 is marketing. This is like how to ask for work, how to form relationships, how to approach client service. And this is a big mindset shift. And it's one that took me quite a while to really get comfortable with. And the reason I think this is important is that a lot of lawyers will go through many, many years of practice. I know I did, where you are waiting for the next opportunity to come land on your desk. And what I think is really key and can really make a huge difference in terms of how your career grows is to be very proactive in seeking out the assignments and seeking out lawyers that you want to work with. And so when I talk about marketing, that's what I'm getting at. It's how are you going to be intentional in carving out the career path that you want, and what are the steps that you can do now to start to get there. Week 5 is all about feedback. We talked a bit about feedback today, and I have a ton of materials on feedback, different ways of asking for it, what you can do with it, some of the physiological responses you have when receiving feedback. And I think really focusing in on how to use feedback and providing feedback is a lesson unto itself. And week 6 is really kind of the final polish. That is talking about presentation skills, public speaking tips, answering questions. And this is really something that would be applicable not just in what you would consider to be a formal presentation like the one I'm doing now. This is every time you, in a law firm context, every time you go to speak to the senior partner on a file or the senior lawyer, you are effectively presenting. You are doing a mini presentation. And same with phone calls, meetings. You want to learn how to prepare for those interactions so that you go into them with confidence and you go in there and you make your point. And so that is the final. That is the final week, and each lesson will have kind of its own set of exercises to do over the course of the week. So I realize now we're getting, we're getting close to our time. The cost of the course is $189 Canadian, and that includes GST. Um, I My goal is not to make this course so unaffordable that people can't take it. I've priced it at what I think is reasonable. I also realize, and I've had some students reach out to me to say that they're not able to afford it at this time. Um, I thought about, creating some sort of a, incentive or giveaway or that sort of thing. I can tell you a few things. One is I am trying to obtain corporate sponsorship. So if you have ideas on how, and I have had a meeting about that. So there may be some funding that will come through, but it is definitely not guaranteed. You can help me in that effort by writing to me and telling me about how you would like to take the course, how it would be helpful for you, and why it is not affordable at this time. And I will do what I can to help to try to secure some funding. The other thing is maybe there's a way of reaching a deal. And I thought about, okay, well, maybe I'll create a package, but what I'm trying to impart on you as students is to really think about how you can create opportunities for yourself. And so I'm going to shift that onus over onto you. And if you're really keen about the course and it is problematic, I would invite you to propose something to me. I am more than welcoming of that sort of proposal, and I want to be able to work with you to make this happen. I think this course will be better if there are more students in it, because there are more of you to work with each other. And one of the things that I really believe is that those of you who sign up for the course, there is the learning, the training, the skills development that takes place within the course, but there's the social component to it as well. And you likely experience this in law school. You will likely experience this in your professional life. The school will come and go, the job will come and go, but the relationships that you form will last a very long time. And so I want to create a platform where you can forge those relationships starting at a very early stage. Um, this may be a bit ambitious, but I love the idea of having students who are not just in one place geographically, that this is really a global community that we're in, especially now that we've gone to this social distancing where the digital communication is at an all-time high. I would love, it is my dream to see all of you connect on a platform that will really set you up for a long-term relationship with each other. So I think I've kind of covered my main points. So what I'm going to do now is go into the Q&A. And to do this, I need to stop sharing my screen, so bear with me. I've probably just jumped in size, and I'm going to go into the Q&A to see what's happening here. So, um, okay, in a situation where, so I'm going to start from the top. In a situation where a student feels he or she is overwhelmed with work and has deadlines approaching, which they may not meet, what is the best course of action? And so this is exactly the kind of situation that a student can find themselves in that high market situation. And I think, you know, the first piece that is going to be really critical is to evaluate what the work is on your plate, what deadlines you are facing, and to get a very clear picture of all of those things. The next step that I would think about is, okay, which of these deadlines, if any, are flexible? Where, you know, if you've got a list and there's one that has a limitation period coming up, and if you miss it, you lose your right to file a claim, that obviously is a non-negotiable deadline. But there may be others that are more flexible. So you might do that work initially to see, well, is there anything that I could move? The next step is to think about, okay, maybe I can't do all of this work myself, but who else could help me with this? You are ultimately potentially, I mean, whether you can organize it all on your own, that's one thing. If you can't, if you're going to have to renegotiate some deadlines, I would highly recommend going to the lawyers or the clients or whoever it is that you need to negotiate with a plan already in hand. And so if it's within a law firm and you've got multiple lawyers that you're working with, sometimes you can enlist their help. You can say, well, these are the different deadlines I have. I'll turn it to you to decide who gets their work done first. That sometimes works. If you have somebody who's responsible in your firm for talent management, you may involve them in that process. But ultimately, if you're able to go to them and say, listen, here's what I've got on my plate. I've got a plan for how we can make this work. I can get help from this person. That is a lot more effective than just showing up in somebody's office and saying, I can't do your work. It is certainly more effective than not doing the work at all. And when it comes to those deadlines, another piece that's really important to bear in mind is um, if you do not tell somebody that you're not doing their work and they think that you are doing their work, and you know, we kind of get to the situation where we've run out of time and nobody else can do it, that's probably the stickiest point, both for you and for the lawyer who is giving you the work. Um, so that's what I would recommend doing. I'd sit down and do a full inventory, think about which deadlines can be pushed, who can help you do the work, is there anybody in your firm that can help you with this negotiation, and finally, it's communicating and coming up with likely renegotiated deadlines. In terms of, is this a free program that you're offering? I do have a number of free resources online. If you go to uplevelcpd.com, you'll find a free game plan summer course for students, and you will also find a free time management course for students. And if you go to uplevellawyercoaching.com, that's my website, you'll see there's a number of blog articles. So these are all resources that are designed, a lot of them for students, and those are free. The 6-week course is not free. I have put a price tag on that. As I explained a few minutes ago, the question might predate that. The paid course, I am going to try to find some funding for it. At the moment, it's not free. On to the next question. Is there a website to write articles on certain topics that won't get plagiarized because we will be writing ourselves? I want to express my interest, but safely without my work being stolen or used by anyone in their university submissions. Is there a website to write articles? I'm so sorry. I actually don't really understand the question. What I would invite you to do is to email me with your question, and I can try to answer it. But I don't understand it. We are at the 1 hour mark. I'm going to continue answering the questions. So anybody who would like to stay on the line is welcome to. But if you are signing off, I just wanted to say goodbye and thank you so much for joining me. And if you have questions about the program, please feel free to send me an email. And my email address, I'm sure you'll be able to find me if you've signed up for the course, but it's pprice, PPRICE, at uplevellawyercoaching.com. So if you Google Paula Price Lawyer Coach, you'll be able to find me. But yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for joining. And if you have any feedback, please feel free to send me an email. I would really love to know which elements of this presentation were helpful, where you would have liked to see more, and what I might be able to offer going forward. So I'm going to go back to the questions. Um, so in the digital age, can you provide an example of a way to respectfully ask for work from a lawyer? So um, what again, I have to preface this with, I'm not inside a law firm at the moment, but based on my experience in a law firm and working with lawyers, I think the way to respectfully ask for work is to be is to start that to start uh, to start a communication. My guess is that email would be a good way to start with that. An email introducing yourself, talking about what what you maybe you have an interaction with them, reminding them, we met last summer or we met during recruitment, talking about some of the work that they do, saying that you'd be really interested in helping them. Would you like to set up a phone call? You could do a phone call with the lawyer and have a chance to communicate. Maybe it's a Zoom call. Some way of sort of making an introduction so that that lawyer knows who you are. That lawyer may or may not have any work, and usually that is kind of for the lawyer, that's what's going through their mind is, what can I possibly ask the student to help me with? Now, if the lawyer has work, then chances are they will say, okay, sure, yes, there's something that you can help me with. If they write back and they say that they don't have work, then you get to decide whether or not you want to pursue that a little bit more. And that's where we go into some of those non-billable things that we were talking about. So maybe there's something that an article that you could help them write. Maybe there are files that are going stale. Maybe they would like their precedents updated. It's maybe asking them if there's expressing an interest, expressing enthusiasm. Are there ways of helping out that lawyer? And maybe it's just a gentle hello. Maybe you send them some articles that you think are interesting based on their practice area. It really is tricky. I think part of the digital age and asking for work is, when you're working remotely, the onus is on you to set the structure for your day. And so having in your mind how you're going to approach your work day, who you're going to reach out to, what kind of assignments you are looking to get. I would recommend doing that work and then creating a plan for yourself. And um, you may need to reach out to more than one lawyer and kind of figuring out how you're going to do that in a way that will allow you to manage your time. And so maybe you stagger it a little bit so that if one of them says yes and then another says yes, you're not all of a sudden facing too much work. But I would recommend having a plan in place. So I'm going to move on to the next question. So this is a question regarding this current scarcity of law firm internships during the COVID-19 pandemic. Would it be unprofessional to reach out to law firms to ask if firms looking for a student volunteer? I know that many students have been deprived of valuable work opportunities due to the pandemic. So that is a really, really, it's an excellent question. I don't think anybody would fault you for reaching out to law firms and saying that you're interested in helping out in a volunteer way. If you know individuals who are at law firms, I would encourage you to reach out and ask people in your network if they know of any opportunities. And I would sort of set my expectations, or manage my expectations so that you don't feel too let down if the answer is no. You may get a lot of no's before you get a yes. I would also encourage you to think outside of the law firm ambit, because a lot of the skills that you'll be wanting to develop, you can probably also develop outside of a law firm. And so it may be that there are other organizations that need help, not-for-profit organizations that are looking for help with maybe some legal information. Maybe maybe you look to help out in a capacity that is not necessarily legal, but where you'll be getting some of the skills. Maybe it's writing skills or marketing skills, or even just that social interaction piece, creating opportunity. And I think if you are in a position where there is not an immediate law position available, um, think of what you might do so that when the economy picks up, when the jobs are coming back again, you have an opportunity to say, well, I didn't have the law job, but here are the things that I did last summer, and here are the skills that I developed. Okay, so I see a question here. What should our expectations be re student principal relationships? Um, and I really appreciate this question. And um, I actually prepared notes on this question. So let me just see what I have here. In terms of your relationship with your principal, I mentioned in the context of the webinar that sometimes you'll be matched with somebody where it isn't quite a fit. Sometimes you'll be matched to somebody and it is a perfect fit. Your principal is really there to make sure that, in some cases, it's really an administrative role. I know my principal was a lovely man. I think we had lunch a couple of times, but we never worked together. And his job was really to sign off on my work as an articling student and to say that I checked all the boxes. Um, it's obviously a professional relationship. So first and foremost, it's communicating in a professional way, having the expectations that maybe this isn't going to be your mentor, because there are different types of relationships. There's the principal, there are mentors, there's formal mentors, there's informal mentors. And I think the best thing is really just to see what that relationship is like. If you find that that principal that's been assigned to you, maybe it's not this magic fit, but you still want to pursue a relationship with that person, then I would recommend looking at how opportunities that you might have to communicate with that person, how you might help them out, how you might foster that relationship. Um, there's this idea of treating people the way that we want to be treated. In situations where you're trying to develop a relationship and maybe it's challenging, I would look at it a little bit differently. How does that person like to be treated? And to approach the relationship in that way. If that principal relationship doesn't turn out to be the relationship that you are looking for, maybe you're looking for more mentorship, then I would encourage you to look at other lawyers that are in the firm and find ways to that maybe you have a more natural fit with, and find ways to develop your relationships with them. So hopefully that answers the question. In terms of the expectations, what should the expectations be? I don't know. I think your expectations are that they will be the person who signs off on everything, but principals are as varied as lawyers. So I don't know that you can have a clear set of expectations because everybody is so different. And I appreciate the comment. I have no income in my family and I've been unemployed for several years since graduating. Please make courses free. So I would encourage you to reach out to me. Again, as I mentioned, I'm trying to get sponsorship for some of the work that I'm doing because I really would love to offer it for free. Um, and so if you write to me, I will share that. I won't share who you are, but I can share the fact that there are students who really need this work, really want these programs, who simply can't afford it. And if I'm able to do that, it really increases the chances, I think, of finding corporate sponsors. I spoke with somebody earlier this week. I've never done that before, just in case anybody's wondering. I've never gone out and tried to find an organization to sponsor my work, but I think this is really important. And I was really pleasantly surprised at the reception that I got. And so I would encourage you to write to me. It gives me sort of more persuasive evidence, if you will, of why this is a valuable project and why others should fund this. I can get my attends to attend if you provided it is free. They cannot pay either. I hope you get sponsored. I do too. Thank you. And I want to watch webinars. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And absolutely. if there are topics, and this goes to the feedback piece, if there are topics that you would like to see, then please send them to me because I create a lot of the content based on the feedback that I receive from students. And so please let me know. Please let me know what topics would be useful for you. The next question is, do you have any books you recommend for any of the topics you touched on today, such as social integration, how firms work, etc.? Um, I will try to. Um, there are a lot of books out there. Books that I would recommend. Um, I see this. I don't. I don't want to say your name out loud in case nobody else can see it. But would you please send me an email and I'll think about that one, and I will share that information with students that have provided their email addresses to me, because that's a really excellent question. But right now I'm drawing a blank. But yeah, I do have resources. Um, yes, exactly. I'll send it in a follow-on email. How do you stay in touch with lawyers you meet in LinkedIn or emails? I don't know what to say after it was nice meeting you. It's an interesting question. I think I guess the question is, what kind of a relationship are you looking to have? So the question, sorry, I should probably repeat that a bit louder. How do I stay in touch with lawyers that I meet in LinkedIn or emails? I don't know what to say afterwards. So on LinkedIn, I think what is really easy is to, I mean, if there's a lawyer in particular that you're interested in staying in touch with, look them up, see what they're posting, and make comments on articles or things that they post in their feed. I think everybody feels good when somebody comments or likes something that they've written. I know I do. And I'll see that name, for myself, I'll see the name on LinkedIn and I'll go, okay, well, this person is supporting my work. This is excellent. And I do that for other lawyers that I want to stay in touch with. Realistically, people are busy. People are really, really busy. And the idea of having these long, lengthy exchanges is just not practical. But if you're able to communicate kind of in that comments field, I think that's a really easy way of staying in touch. Where it becomes relevant, I mean, for me, I actually, um, I like to have people in my network that I can reach out to for specific things. So, for example, I organize a number of speaking engagements. And so people tend to be quite receptive to that when I send them a note and say, hey, listen, there's this thing going on and we'd love to have you speak. People love to do that. And so that's a way of staying connected with people if you can find a natural point of contact to stay in touch with them. So after saying it was nice to meet you, I don't think you need to do too much, but absolutely follow them. If you can tell they like a certain thing, maybe send them some articles about that. If you think there's more there, I mean, if you want to form a relationship with them, you can always ask them to have a Zoom conference call with you. The worst that will happen is people will say no. I've had both experiences. I've had people who are, quite keen to meet up. I've done that. I've reached out to people and said, hey, why don't we have a meeting? Um, and people have said yes, people have said no. And I think once you form that initial connection, realistically, what often happens is you won't really have contact with that person for quite some time, but they may become relevant a little bit further down the road. And you may have an opportunity that you can share with them. They may have an opportunity where you come to mind. So now I'm looking at the next question. Do you have any thoughts on how to structure your day right now while working remotely? Is there a certain time that you would recommend starting work? Thanks so much. So, yeah, working from home, I made the transition in 2017. I can tell you it was weird, weird, weird to go from an office environment to working from home. Um, I personally think that structure is a godsend, and I have two kids at home, and so it's especially important in my life for there to be routines and structures. And a dear friend of mine, Mylène Oul, who runs Flow Organization, it's based out of Montreal. She does organization for homes and families, and I need to credit her with this. But she had the suggestion of having anchors in your day. So these are things that happen no matter what, waking up, going to bed, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I use those as pillars in my day, and I have my own routines around them. So this is maybe more than you're asking for, but I get up really early before anybody else is up. I go for a run and I sit down and I do thinking work because that's when that fits in my day. Then we do a family breakfast. Then I start my work day. And so, and that goes on and it kind of varies depending on what the structure of my day looks like. For the reason I sort of give that example is but yes, I highly recommend having a structure. If there's an expectation that you're going to be responding to emails throughout the day, then I would set myself up with a schedule. Now, this would be kind of weird because for me, I my business is a little bit different because I come at this from the perspective of kind of I do work for an organization, and that is probably the closest I have to office work, and the rest of it is purely self motivated. So I set the hours, but I recommend having a window that is dedicated exclusively to your work, where you will be watching your emails, where you'll be at your desk. Now, if you're starting out at a law firm and there's no work and you're trying to find work, then I would kind of approach it like how you would approach job applications, where you set a certain amount of time, you have a routine, you decide which lawyers, it's kind of like it is like applying for a job, right? Who do you want to work with? Why would you be good to work with them? How are you going to approach this? And I'm not suggesting you send your CV to each of these lawyers, but really think about it strategically, how much time you're going to be spending. How much time are you going to be spending working? And the days will fill themselves once you start having that work. And then you get to decide, okay, these are the hours I'm going to work. Um, as students, you're used to working in various spaces. I imagine you study at a library, you might study at a school, you may have group work. When you bring all of that home, boundaries start to become an issue as well. And so I find that having, right now I can tell you my boundaries are quite blurred. In an ideal world, the boundaries would be a little bit more structured. So maybe you start at 9 and you finish at 4. I'm making up these times. I don't know what is realistic or appropriate, but having that in mind so that you set the structure for yourself and build around that is how I would recommend approaching a work from home situation. So I'm moving to the next question. I finished my legal practice course after my law degree about 4 or 5 years ago. Any advice on how to get a training contract in London, as I don't have anyone to help me get legal work and I have been unemployed? That's really, really challenging. I don't know the London market at all. What I would recommend from my experience in a Canadian market would be networking. I think that is the number one way of finding out about opportunities. Number two is developing your skills. And so, think about what you like to do, how you can contribute, what unique skills do you have. There might be things that you can do that are not necessarily legal work, but that would lead you to legal work. Or you might find that you start doing something that is not legal, in the strict practicing law, but that you really enjoy. So, I mean, if you're, I don't know I don't know what your current situation is. If you're not working at all, or if you are working but not in the way that you want. But I would just recommend networking and building your skills as much as possible, and trying to find opportunities for yourself. And I'm just looking at the questions, trying to figure out. So my direct email address for more questions, it's pprice, so PPRICE at uplevellawyercoaching.com, UPLEVELLAWYERCOACHING.com. And I'm sorry, it is way too long for an email address, but pprice at uplevellawyercoaching.com. You can also find me if you Google Paula Price Lawyer Coach. I think I come up in searches. What kind of situation questions do they ask in an interview, like examples? And can you send us a sample answer? I have, if you email me directly, I have a handbook that I prepared for law students interviewing at law firms. And I think that is probably the best resource that I could send to you. And that is also a free resource. So, yeah, I just gave my email address. Email me and tell me that you want to have a copy of my interview handbook. I'll send it over to you. Um, yeah, what I'll do is I'll put the next question is, can you send a link to the free courses, please, in our emails? So I'll send an email with links to the free courses. I've seen people write articles on topics, like even for advice. So how can I do that? Okay, I'm really sorry. I don't understand the question. So, oh, thank you so much, Fatima. This is wonderful. Okay, so that is my email address. You're very kind. I totally appreciate that. How do you keep conversations? Okay, so I'm sorry. I don't understand the question. So please send me an email. I don't understand. How do you keep conversation connected, like in LinkedIn or emails? I struggle to keep in touch. So I gave suggestions before, which is really to go into the feeds of lawyers or professionals or anybody who you want to stay connected with and like their work. Like, comment, share. That's a really good way to promote other people, and everybody likes that. Hey, Paul, is there a sign up link for the paid course? So, yes. And again, I'm sorry, I'm not tech savvy enough to drop that into the chat. The link, you will find it at uplevelcpd.com. So if you go to uplevelcpd.com, you'll see there are, I think there's 3 courses up at the moment, and one of them is Not Your Average Summer Program. And that is the one that is a paid course. And you can go in and um, you can pay for that online. It's all automatic. If you can't find it, please send me an email and I can help you. I'll send you the link and all that. Anon, how do you deal with rejections? Oh, such a great question. And to pull yourself back up after many attempts and applications, and what and who motivates you? Okay, so oh my gosh, I love this question so much because I have been rejected a million times, and it is a part of learning, and it is so important. Um, I can tell you, I wrote a blog post at the beginning of my coaching practice, and I quoted this person. I think his name is Jason Selks. He's a sports psychologist, and I sent him a note saying, "Hey, just wanted to say I put a link to your what I think it was a podcast," and he wrote back and said, "Thanks for your note. Keep attacking," in capital letters, and exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. And I put that email, I cut it out, I printed it, I highlighted the keep attacking, and I stuck it on the wall in our kitchen downstairs. Um, and that is how, one of the many things that has helped me stay motivated. Um, my children now know who Jason Selks is, and we all talk about keep attacking. And the reality is, you are going to be rejected. If you follow Harry Potter's author, whose name is escaping me, had dozens of rejections before she started Harry Potter. So many successful individuals will talk about the number of times they were rejected before their ideas were accepted. In the law firm context, I mean, absolutely, everybody gets rejected, and this happens in the formal job interview process. It happens in the law firm when you're trying to ask for work and somebody and nobody wants to give you work, or they can't give you work. So this is like probably one of the number one skills that you need to develop in life. And how to stay motivated. I mean, there's different things that come out of rejection. Why are you being rejected? I mean, sometimes it's just not a good fit. Maybe the thing that you're applying for is not right for you. If people are rejecting you, maybe they're not the kind of person that you would be, or maybe it's not the kind of firm where you would thrive. It's just, what can you learn? And I try to look at every failure, and some of them really sting. I can tell you, some of them are so unpleasant. And one of my favorite mentors used to say, it's sitting on blisters. When you have something, it doesn't go your way. It's also some of the best learning. So yeah, how do you pull yourself back up? And how do you stay motivated? There's looking at what the end goal is. Like, what about this? What can you pull out of this that is positive? If this didn't work, what else can you try? I think it was Thomas Edison had 999 failed attempts or 9,999 attempts at a light bulb before he finally figured it out. And each time it didn't work, it was a learning opportunity. So um, it is so hard. It is so hard in the moment. And I think finding ways to motivate yourself, um, I have lots of suggestions. So, hopefully these answers are helpful. If you want more, by all means, send me an email. I'll try to figure out some more ways. But I think also knowing that you're not alone, especially now. Especially now. And actually, there's one other point I should make in relation to this is that so much of what happens is dictated by factors that are outside of you. A lot of it is within your control, your reaction to it, the way that you're going to move forward, all that is in your control. But when the economy takes a beating, there are going to be fewer opportunities, and that's just how it is. And I've been around long enough to see a few cycles, and one of my favorite stories is about a lawyer who went through articles around the time of the global economic crisis. This is 2008, 2009. And she came out of it with no job and and she just decided to start her own firm. And she found a mentor in her field. They have the most beautiful story of a mentoring relationship. I mean, I think she basically he was a paid mentor. She developed that relationship, and she went on to found a firm of her very own, and in the style that she wanted. And so I think what happens is, there's the rejection, and the usual opportunities may not be there, but there are new opportunities that will open up. And I think what's really, really interesting, and now especially, is that the world is shifting so much, and I think that the opportunities coming out of this are going to be so different. And our next generation of lawyers is so well poised to take a system that in some ways needs to be revamped and to run with that. So hopefully that helps. And yeah, if there's anything else, just send me an email. What areas of law did you do? So I was commercial litigation. You might find this surprising, but the adversarial aspect of it didn't really jive with my personality. So what I loved about it was the research and the writing. And so I morphed more into that role as time progressed. I also did some corporate, well, for mergers, corporate M&A, for transactions that needed to be blessed by courts. I would go in for the court approvals. And so, yeah, I did some court work, was involved in some really big files. I was involved in some really small files. And that's what I was practicing. So I'm moving on to the next question. Thank you for asking. Lots of 2Ls and 3Ls have said going for coffee is an important networking tool. Do you have any recommendations for a digital way to have this more casual interaction? So I've been finding Zoom to be absolutely fantastic. Zoom is a great way to connect with lawyers, where it's a little bit more than a phone call and a little bit less than an in-person meeting. So I guess it's a question of finding a way to approach a lawyer in a way that they will be interested in having a conversation with you. And I think if you say to them, I'm in law school, I'm really looking to learn about X. I found you on whatever, LinkedIn, and I really like something about your practice. Write a personal note. Would you like to do a Zoom call? And then you can set up the Zoom call, make it short, maybe half an hour, so that they don't feel like it's an onerous, maybe even 15 minutes. I mean, it doesn't have to be a lot. I find that meeting somebody online is actually pretty effective. And the nice thing about it is that it's a relatively low footprint in somebody's day to log on to a call relative to having to go to a coffee shop, sit down, order coffee, and all those things. So I think that it's a wonderful thing to do. I would also re-emphasize this idea that in this digital space where we are all now on this level playing field, where social or the physical distance is no longer quite as important, I think the opportunities to meet people is expanded. And for myself, I've met a number of US professionals, a bit of a different space, but I've been able to reach out to people that I never would have been able to contact before, because we do this all online. So next question, I think it's great to make new connections, but when you ask to meet up following a law fair or law firm event where you both met, what would you suggest talking about? I mean, I'm an aspiring solicitor and I want to be hired, but you cannot directly ask them, can you? Okay, this is such a neat question. Here's a little tip, is If you meet somebody at a law fair, like a big thing where they've met a lot of people, I recommend having a little piece in there for them to remember you. So I was the person in the purple tie. I don't know. We talked about sports cards. We, something. Um, give them a bit of, give them a bone. They may not remember you, and so give them something that they can um, attach to you when they receive that email. Because if they don't know who you are, they were really going to be answering in the dark. Um, so how do you follow up with them? Um, I think the best approach is genuine. I'm interested. I'd like to become a solicitor, and I'd love to know how you started. Um, I think a lot of lawyers would love to share their story, especially when there's somebody that's actually listening to their story. So I think um, if you are going to make that overture, be genuine and be interested and ask questions. And the objective here isn't to tell them. I mean, I think if you say, I'm really interested in looking for an opportunity, I mean, you probably can't say, can I be hired? I mean, that would be probably not the first thing that you would say, but um, absolutely, I think you can ask questions, learn about them. You can say that you're interested, say that you're looking. You can ask them, I'm really interested in becoming a solicitor. What would you recommend? What steps would you recommend that I take right now? And then follow up with them, thank them, be polite, do all the things, think about all the things that you would like um, if somebody were to ask you those same questions, and do those things. I would not spend a lot of time talking about about yourself, about all the things that you've done. If they ask you, by all means, but when you're I think it's a good rule of thumb. Ask and really listen, and use it as an opportunity to learn. And if there's ways that you can help that person out, then I would offer that help as well. How do I recommend staying focused? That is an interesting question. I guess it depends on what you're trying to focus on. Um, I guess having pretty clear goals in the big picture. What are you trying to accomplish? Um, Plans. I really like plans. So planning out my weeks, planning out days to have the structure in place. How to focus on a certain task. Give yourself a time, maybe. Sometimes if I'm procrastinating, I set a timer for 10 minutes, or I say, okay, I'll do this for the next 20 minutes and then I can stop. There are a number of ways of staying focused. Hopefully, some of those suggestions are helpful. And if you have more specific sort of background, then let me know. Send me a note or something. How do I find out what is unique about myself? In terms of skills, I don't have anyone to tell me. Oh, that is such a good question. Um, it is such a good question. Honestly, if you think about things that you have really liked, okay, for example, when I was in grade two, I loved the dictionary. I discovered a dictionary. I thought, oh, isn't this like a magical thing where I can go into this book and find all these answers? And so, not surprisingly, I really enjoyed research. People will give you comments if you think about, and I've actually done this exercise recently, to think about things that people have said to you over the course of the years that kind of resonate with you. Maybe somebody commented on the way that you write, or the way that you communicated a certain message. Um, Maybe it's the way that you approach problem solving. Um, I mean, you can think about what is unique about myself. You might be able to think of that on your own. What do you really enjoy? What comes really naturally to you that may not come naturally to other people? Um, Maybe you're really good at connecting people. Maybe it's I think there's different ways of thinking about that, but I would really ask yourself that question. What do I do that is exceptional? And what have other people commented on? Not necessarily lawyers, but just anybody in your network or in your life. Frankly, your parents sometimes are really good judges of what is unique about you. That's really lovely. P Price at uplevellawyercoaching.com. So it is correct, except there's an extra at in there. So it should just be P Price at Up Level Lawyer Coaching without that at in the middle. Kind of the easiest areas of law or the least stressful. I think they all have their challenges. Um, I have been told that employment law is quite rewarding. I don't know that I would say any area of law is easy, because once you get into the weeds, it's all pretty nuanced. There are, I think what can be easy is if you find yourself in an area of law that is narrow. So you'll still have a lot to learn, but you won't have to learn a bunch of different areas. So for example, when I was in litigation, one thing that I found a little bit challenging and sometimes frustrating and exciting. I did commercial litigation, and the nature of the files that came across my desk were always different. So sometimes it was international arbitration, sometimes it was a small claims matter, sometimes it was a a Supreme Court file, a Court of Appeal file, and there's different rules for every different forum. The nature of the work might have been construction one day, contracts the next day, employment the next day. I mean, there was a wide variety. So on the one hand, that was really exciting because my days were never dull. But if you want to be an expert in your field, then I think finding a niche practice is a way of kind of managing the volume of law that you need to stay on top of. So I don't think anything is easy, but I think there are certain practices that are a little bit more contained than others. So going back to the question, I think people really enjoy employment. I think it can be stressful though, because it's adversarial. So I've always thought that the adversarial aspect of litigation is stressful. I find it stressful. Other people don't. They actually thrive on it. The idea of cross-examining a witness brings them a lot of joy. To me, it just makes me feel kind of I don't want to do it. So that is very much a personal question. I think solicitors' work can be less adversarial, but it can also be adversarial because you might be negotiating really tough contracts. You might have really tight deadlines that can be really stressful. There might be some issues that come up for clients that are really stressful. The people that you are working with, your clients, might be really demanding. So I don't know that there is any type of anything that is not stressful. If you want to get into a different environment, I think in private practice, typically it can be quite stressful. Maybe a smaller firm might be less stressful if the clients are less demanding. So I think it really depends on what you're looking for. But I hope, and hopefully that answers your question. So what kind of questions can you ask to network? World's your oyster. It really depends on who you're networking with. And again, it kind of goes back to this idea of being genuine. What do you do? What drew you to a certain practice area? What do you love about the work that you do? What would you do differently? Or actually, I don't even know if I'd ask that, because that implies that maybe they did something that they didn't like. I mean, I would try to keep it positive, stay engaged, ask follow-up questions, keep it natural. I would not ask questions that are potentially too personal unless they volunteer that information. Yeah, I think those are some questions I would ask. And I'm looking at the next one. Can you see our anonymous questions name? So if it comes through an anonymous attendee, no, I can't see your name on the questions. And I confess I'm not looking at the chat. And we're actually nearly we're nearly at the end of our list. So could I say I hate reading and I am lazy, and that's why I'm good at being efficient? I find ways to do things easily that take a shorter time. So I guess I wouldn't phrase it as I'm lazy. I mean, with some people, maybe that would be kind of funny, but if you don't know somebody, and in fact, I don't think I would say that. I think what you could say is what you're saying here is that you're good at being efficient. I think focusing on the positive. I don't know that I would highlight things that don't come across positive. Your intention may be to be kind of funny or to be personable, but I think until you really get to know somebody, I would shy away from that type of humor. And in a professional environment, it really depends. It depends on who you're speaking with. But I would find it quite risky to say I was lazy, because I don't know that would, and I hate reading. That might not go over so well, especially for lawyers who do a lot of reading. Um, Last question. I am good at criticizing. What skill is that, being always negative? Um, I mean, it sounds to me like it's falling in the category of attention to detail. I think lawyers are trained to troubleshoot and be looking out for potential pitfalls. So, I mean, I think you could say you have good critical thinking skills, and I'm good at criticizing. What skill is that, being always negative? Um, yeah, I think it's critical skills, and hopefully that's an answer. Hopefully that answers the question. I'm not sure I understand. Okay, and here's the last question. Okay, I need help. What legal area to pursue, as I don't like stress? What is the least stressful or least pressuring? And so we talked about that in relation to another question in terms of practice areas. And my recommendation was to really find a narrow niche. Another thing is to look outside of law firms. So law firms are typically, I would say, at the top in terms of levels of stress. It could be less stressful potentially if you go to firms that are maybe smaller firms, or if you take on a different role within a firm. So, maybe you're taking on a knowledge management role where there are fewer deadlines, and you still get to be working within the law, but not in a client-facing capacity. Or you might go and find an in-house position that is less stressful. I think it really is a question of finding out what you like to do. You may find that you have a higher tolerance for stress if the work that you're doing really appeals to you, um, and then looking for the opportunities that would match with that. And again, I would be encouraged, or I would encourage you to think outside the box on that one. And maybe it's not a law firm. Maybe it's a government organizations have a reputation for being less stressful. I wouldn't assume that they're going to be that much less stressful, though, because all organizations are going to have their ups and downs. And so it's kind of a question you kind of have to trial and error your way through. So, what would you talk in emails to network with them? Okay, so this is going to be the last question, because I'm going to wrap up our webinar. But what would you talk? So this is, I can take this as, what would you talk about in emails network? Again, kind of going back to the theme of asking questions. I saw that you did X. I'm really interested in Y. I would love the chance to connect with you. That kind of thing. I think sort of simple is better. And when it comes to emails, people don't like to read a whole ton of text. And so trying to keep the text to a minimum, short and sweet, is usually better than a big dense email, because that person is only going to feel obligated to read it, and that could be overwhelming. So yeah, do short and sweet. Do you have time for a call? Would love to get to know you, something like that. So thank you, everybody. That has been a lot of fun. I am going to close out the Q&A now, and there should be a recording of this, assuming I've done everything the way I should. And I appreciate you all being here today, and I really do hope that that I will see you in the future. I would encourage you to ask me any questions if you have questions about the course that I'm offering, and I think it would be a lot of fun. So thanks again, and stay well. Bye for now.